Today I'll be showing how to install a subwoofer in a 2022 Veloster N with the Infinity Premium Sound System. I've chosen to use a powered line level converter by AudioControl and a Rockford Fosgate powered 10-inch subwoofer. To begin, you'll need to disconnect and remove the battery. This is done for two reasons. One, to prevent any accidental damage to equipment while you're hooking up the wiring, and two, so you'll be able to gain access to the driver's side firewall. To remove the battery, unscrew the 12mm bolt that holds the battery retaining plate in place. After the bolt has been removed, pull up on the plate and remove it from the battery tray. Next, loosen the 10mm bolts that hold the battery's negative and positive terminals in place. Once the battery terminals have been loosened, you can remove the battery. The positive terminal is a little tricky. You'll need to angle the battery to remove it from the tray and to get the positive terminal off the battery. Once the battery has been removed, you will need to remove the car's ECU. There are three 12mm bolts holding the ECU in place. After the bolts have been removed, unclip the two plugs that attach to the top of the ECU. The last thing to remove is the battery's negative terminal that is attached to the ECU by a plastic zip tie push pin. This can be removed by using a plastic removal tool. You could simply set the ECU to the side, but I chose to remove the ECU so it wasn't in my way. Now that the battery and the ECU have been removed, you have full access to the driver's side firewall, which will allow you to easily run a power cable into the car. The car's main wiring harness is protected by a large plastic cover instead of just a large rubber grommet. For this reason, I chose to drill a hole in the firewall using a uni-bit and install a rubber grommet in the new hole. There is a square section of metal in the driver's side footwell that is perfect for drilling the hole. After the hole has been drilled, I would suggest sanding any sharp metal pieces off using a Dremel before installing the grommet and running the power wire. Once the power wire is through the firewall and into the car, you'll need to remove the rubber door seal. This can be done by pulling up on the seal with your hand. Next, I removed the bottom door kick plate. This can be done by pulling up on the piece with your hand or using a plastic pry tool. I started at the back and worked my way towards the front of the car. Before I ran the power wire to the back of the car, I removed the rear seat cushion. The cushion is held into place with two 12mm bolts. The bolts are located between the bottom cushion and the backrest. After each bolt has been removed, pull up on the front of the cushion and then out to remove it. Now that the rear seat cushion has been removed, we can run the power wire down the driver's side and back to the trunk. The wire can be easily tucked under the plastic panels behind the driver's seat. After the wire has been ran, you can go ahead and reinstall the kick plate and door seal. To add the AudioControl line level converter, you'll need to tap into the factory amplifier, which is located under the passenger seat. To make this easier, you'll need to remove the passenger seat. The seat is held into place with 4 bolts. I was able to use a 10mm socket to remove the bolts. The bolts were held into place rather tightly, so I had to use a breaker bar to get the bolts loosened. Once the bolts were loosened, they came out easily. Lean the seat back so you can access the front of the seat where the seat's wiring harness is located. There are 2 zip ties holding the wiring in place and will need to be cut or removed. You can remove these using a plastic trim tool. There are 4 wire plugs that need to be removed. After the plugs have been detached from the seat can be removed from the car. Moving on to the amplifier. The amp has 2 wiring harnesses, one red and one blue. We will be focusing on the blue harness for this install. Here is the wiring guide to help you locate the wires you'll need to tap into. Feel free to pause the video and look over the guide. Before I began tapping into the amplifier and installing the AudioControl LC2i, I went ahead and ran my RCA and remote turn-on wire. I ran both wires through the seat's left bracket hole. You'll need to loosen the carpet by removing the plastic pushpin in the middle of the rear seat carpet and pulling up on the carpet. After both wires have been ran, you can put the carpet back down and reinstall the plastic push pin. I used the rear seat bolt for my ground. I made sure to use a Dremel and sand off any paint that the ground may touch. This helps to ensure I get a good ground. Onto the amplifier. Unplug both wiring harnesses. Peel back the fabric tape and remove the white tape around the blue harness wires. You'll be tapping into 7 wires. I ended up cutting 4 of the wires because I wanted to bypass the factory subwoofer. For the 12-volt positive, tap into any of the 4 thicker red wires in the blue harness. For the ground, tap into any of the 4 thicker black wires. For remote turn-on, tap into the thinner blue wire located in the middle of the harness. For subwoofer signal, tap into or cut the green and pink wire for negative and the orange and blue wire for positive. Please note the subwoofer's blue wire and the blue remote turn-on wires are both different sizes. For this install, I used wire ferrules on the end of each wire for a cleaner connection to the LOC's wiring harness and Velcro on the bottom to hold the LOC in place. Also, the subwoofer is a dual voice coil, so you can run 4 wires to the LOC, or you can do what I did, which was to cut them, splice them together, and run 2 wires to the LOC, and then run a jumper from positive to positive and negative to negative. This cut down on my wiring. To wire up the LOC, you'll run the RCA plugs into the base output, the black wire to the ground, red wire to the positive 12 volt, the blue remote turn-on wire to the remote in, the blue wire ran along with the RCAs to the sub plug into the remote out, positive and negative speaker inputs, and if you have an ACR1 base remote knob, you can go ahead and run that wire and then plug it into the base knob port of the LOC. Use Tesa or fabric tape around the wires for a nice clean install. If you haven't done so already, reinstall the factory ECU and battery. Since I used 8-gauge wire, I was able to easily route the wire into the factory positive battery plug. Do not install the power wire fuse until the subwoofer's wires have been plugged in. After the subwoofer's wires have been plugged in, insert the fuse into the inline power wire fuse and test the system. Once you've tested the system and set up the LOC, you can reinstall the rear seat and passenger seat. You've now completed the installation. Time to enjoy your new subwoofer. Links to all the tools and products used in this install are in the video description. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more content.